Welcome back from the break. You're still watching NTV Sport Nights, and we're just talking about the Paris Olympics, which are in 123 days. But what a way to end the 13th Africa Games in Accra. They ended on Sunday, and Uganda had 20 medals, 4 gold. I think we should begin from there. The 4 gold that we got in badminton, rugby, sevens, men and women, as well as cycling. Splendid performance from the teams and the individuals. So I'll start with Isma. 4 gold. We didn't have a predictions table for the Africa Games, but how happy are you?
One of the things that struck me, and I'm opening my phone just to confirm the numbers, is the number of medals, for example, that Egypt won.
No, let's not go there. Yeah? You said Egypt is like Morocco. We just admire.
Because they had...
let's look at Tanzania instead.
They had 191 medals. Of those, 102 are gold. The closest country in terms of gold medals or first place finishes was Nigeria.
So they're like the China in Olympics and Russia in Olympics previously.
Isma is trying to bring perspective. So that we are happy, but we should not think we are there, but we have improved.
Yeah, we have improved a great deal. But it's also very wrong to compare us to Egypt.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's why, and I said that in the first segment when I talk about Simba and Young and Al-Ahly. One of the things for me that stands out from the medals that Uganda won at these games is badminton, it's cycling, it's rugby. If you've lived in Uganda long enough, there is never a time when we are discussing these 3 sports disciplines as success stories, because first of all, there is a dream for many Ugandans to see football do well, because it's a sport we learn in our small communities without even needing a coach. It's a sport we play at the age of 2, and it's a sport that 60-year-olds play. So it's a sport that all of us are shaped with. Now, besides that, the success that Uganda has attained over the years at international events has always been in athletics and boxing. Now, when you talk about athletics and boxing, those are individual sports. In addition, there is never success. There is hardly success to write home about in what you would call in team sports disciplines. Because even most of the time, when some of these events come around, we do not send a hockey team, a handball team, regularly enough for us to warrant as a country that Uganda is going to come out successful, because normally the cost associated with sending one Jacob Kiplimo or Joshua Cheptegei is much smaller than choosing to send an entire rugby team of 12 and staff of 14, which is 16. So even if we have all these flimsy or sometimes small arguments we have about how many officials travel, even if we just qualified only Joshua Cheptegei, is guaranteed to have at least 6 officials accompany him as per the rules. The multiplier effect, the UF president will be invited, so will be a general secretary, so will be IOC and general secretary, so will be government, those kind of things. But now, because we do not give attention to a lot of the team sport, Uganda is accustomed to winning medals in the individual sports discipline. So from one of the takeouts, when you talk about the gold, yes, there is an individual sports in Charles Kajimu, a cyclist who actually hones his art in Kenya, because there isn't a lot of support in cycling here. I know my colleagues like Tony Katamba, who is previous work with the NTV sales department, who are very, very passionate about cycling and are spending money wherever they get it from. I don't know, but Uganda Sport has no right to ask where anyone gets money when they spend it on sport, because we are too needy to ask where someone got the money. Is that there are people who are very passionate, and you could see the stride that cycling has taken. I think there's also a girl who's done some tours in Europe.
She's called Mary.
Mary, because I read so many stories a day, but there's one, we even did a story about her in the Daily Monitor at some point. But this is a sport that maybe many of us do not care. And actually for me, my attention towards cycling maybe did not start until my younger sisters, who are avid cyclists, switch on television and are watching the Tour de France for several hours and they have to keep walking through the sitting room. So I end up noticing. Of course, previously I would watch out of maybe leisure, the story of Lance Armstrong, then Jan Ulrich and all these others, but never did I pick that kind of attention to watch cycling. So the strides are now very clear. And when Andrew speaks, maybe he'll even tell you he's had a chance to speak to Kajimu more than all of us on the set. Then you think about badminton. The success of badminton, where they got gold in the doubles, Gladys Mbabazi and Husna Kobugabe, is a story for me of perseverance. These girls hardly miss a tournament. And all that money that takes them to those tournaments is largely government. You'd actually be shocked. That is Husna Kobugabe. She's actually grown up in front of our eyes. I think I've seen her since before she became a teenager, maybe 11 or 12. Competing in all these schools championships where the prize is a Benson and what do they call it, a dozen of books. Is it still a dozen or has it changed name? When we were studying it was a dozen. Yeah, there would be 12 and then a mathematical set and a pack of pencils and a pen. That set, is it still Kofa? I don't know. Oxford, those kind of sets. Yeah, but I've seen Husna compete.
That was quite an experience getting a new one.
Yeah. So at the time, that's where Husna Kobugabe and Gladys Mbabazi have come from. So you see a trajectory of consistency in participating in events. That's why even after just winning that gold, on the next day they were on a flight to France to compete because they need to get ranking points. The way they qualify for the Olympics in the badminton is that the more tournaments you play in, the more ranking points you rack up, and then you can be able to get into the Olympics. So that's another story of perseverance. The last one for rugby, which I've been part of as a journalist and a friend for so many people who run the sport in this country, including coaches and the sponsors, is that Uganda took what was by far their best team in comparison to the opposition. This is the first time rugby was being played at these games. For the men, they had 6 other teams to beat. The women had 4 others.
Because and they're coming from Uruguay, weren't they?
Yeah, both were coming from Uruguay. Oh, yeah. Uganda brought their team A, and the other teams were probably did not see the importance of the games, of the African games. But it's not our place. Uganda could actually go into the games and not win and all come here and whine, why are we spending that kind of conversation. So it's not Uganda's problem. The other teams did not find the competition important because, for example, Kenya brought what would be their bench team to the games. You would imagine they didn't even register their women's team for the games. So Uganda going their best team, and after watching 1-2 games on day one, I was very sure Uganda is going to win both goals. So eventually when they deliver those, you're certain that it was almost a matter of when and not if.
So are you saying that even though we won, we were small fish, we were big fish in a small pond?
Maybe.
There's a good story, Andrew, that I want to relate maybe in 30 seconds. Last Sunday, we ran a story in the Sunday Monitor that speaks about what the African Games have become. And that story speaks of the fight between ANOCA, the Association of National Olympic Committees in Africa, and the International Olympic Committee, where most of the games here were stripped of their Olympic qualification right. And that implies, including the football, because previously these games would qualify teams to the Olympics. That is no longer the case. Now athletes find themselves in a situation where Joshua Cheptegei does not find it important to be at these games. I would imagine the biggest athlete at the games were 2 Kenyans. The lady won the steeplechase, the 3,000 meter steeplechase, Beatrice Chepkoech, who is also the world record holder in that race, and Mary Mora in the 800 meters, the middle distance South Africa. But the rest of them, you could say the second string athletes. And when we did that story, one of the things that I noticed is an interview done by Maria Talu, the Ivory Coast sprinter, and she was speaking about how for her this is very important because she first came to these games when she was a 17-year-old. And she thinks and you know, she speaks with the Pan-Africanism that politicians only use for their convenience. But Talu speaks of it as a platform that made her known first in her homeland, Ivory Coast as a sprinter, then Africa that has got her to compete at the Olympics. So there's a bit of that the best athletes across the continent will not go to the African Games. And that is a bare truth.
Okay, there's a message here from Frank. He says, in some disciplines we performed well, not because the local federations were so much organized or that the government put in put in much in some disciplines. It was on those guys' personal efforts, and now we celebrate their own initiatives. Tuswaleko ngegwanga. So Danielle, yeah, similar to what are your thoughts about the Africa Games? Should we ride on this success? Isma's broken down the gold, there's the silver and the bronze too.
20 medals in total, and any achievement by Ugandan sports person, given what we go through, what they go through to reach such stages, should be celebrated. We should be happy. We should just say thank you that they have managed to get there, because looking at how we ill prepare, how athletes are not funded, we have talked, there are moments when teams have failed to go to big tournaments. They have not represented because the country has not provided the money, and maybe the federation too does not have. It makes it phenomenal to collect the 20 medals. Statistically, and comparing with the previous games, that was a good feat for Uganda. But of course, you cannot say that, like Isma says, compare ourselves with the likes of Nigeria and Egypt, because some of our wins have always been accidental. We ill prepare. Our athletes are not facilitated. I remember one day I was somewhere in Lugogo, and I saw boys, they were weighing in for boxing, this Champions League that's going on, and they were trying, you know, to cut weight. You know, there are those moments in boxing where you go to weigh in and you're fatter. I don't know what happens. Maybe you ate a cup of porridge or something and you're fatter than the usual weight. So they were running from the arena, MTN arena down there, up to that end, drama studio, and coming back just to cut a bit of weight and be able to reach the desired weight, you know, they need for his boxing category. So I watched them and I was like, oh my God, this pain. I don't know if government knows about this. I don't know if their next, you know, maybe their club can know and their manager. But then these boys, for example, go out there and collect a bronze. Out of that, you know, you feel happy for any Ugandan athlete, and they deserve it, because for them they work hard. Only that maybe they're not facilitated, maybe we lack this, we lack that, but
maybe other teams are also more talented, because that can also happen.
Yeah,
we can be good in our own box, but the other teams are better.
Exactly, but with that surrounding us, then you go out there, you get a bronze, you get a gold medal. I think it's a great feat for Ugandan athletes.
Andrew, were all athletes in Accra, did they get what they were due from government? Would you know?
I don't know what they were due, apart from Article 5 of the New Sports Act, that says winners will earn money monthly. Gold 5 million Uganda shillings, silver 3 million, and bronze 1 million. Now you can't say they haven't given it to them because they've just come back, and that's something that actually hasn't been, it's in the act, but it takes time. Sometimes they start, then stop midway. Started with Kiprotich and Kipsiro. So on that front, I do not know, but I know athletes get per diems when they travel, and that I've not had complaints from there.
All of them got?
I don't want to confirm, but I've not had complaints. I've not had complaints that they didn't get. Perhaps the message that that viewer sent, there are some athletes who were never facilitated in the preparations.
Yeah.
Some were, like Ismail is telling you, most of those tournaments in the qualifications, government facilitated. But there are some...
Or rugby are lucky to have a big sponsor like Nile Special who will take them anywhere almost they want to compete, and the union that
for example, Charles Kajimu, who I spoke to extensively, the only time he got facilitation is when he traveled for the games, like the ticket and everything that's taken care of. And he was literally urging government to at least support him as they're going for Olympics, because he has a European tour. Now, in your sport, Ineos, the 25% shareholders at Manchester United, the ones through the Eliud Kipchoge Academy in Kenya that are actually taking care of Charles Kajimu and a few others. So that's where he is. His bike costs over 100 million. This is not a motorcycle, it's a bicycle.
A bicycle.
Uganda shillings?
Uganda shillings.
I saw the most expensive.
And it's model 2022, so in their area that's old. So the European...
Andrew, first pause, go back. How much is Charles Kajimu's bicycle?
Just over 100 million Uganda shillings.
A bicycle.
We ran that bicycle actually at the back page of the monitor, and you saw it is like, where did you get this picture from? Even me, I'm shocked. Like it's like the bicycle. The bicycle is more expensive than some of the huge cars you see on the road.
Actually, that bicycle can buy the cars we all own on set.
Yeah, that's
the sum and there's the balance.
Yes. So he did get that facilitation, but he's saying, government, okay, I have some support here, but it would be nice if you also, because these guys meet the basics to make sure you're fine, but as someone who is doing events ahead of Olympics, he's actually in the process with government preparing for Olympics. So that has at least should be facilitated. They did that for Tokyo. Athletes were given money for training. So it can come through as well. Now,
it was actually 500,000 per month to prepare for the games. Yeah.
Now, I'll also just echo what Ismail and Daniel have said about we've got to appreciate where we are and where we have. You attended Rabat. You know the results that we brought. Now it's quite a leap upward.
From Morocco.
From Morocco. So 20 medals for me is quite something. However, you can't help but go on the other side to say that the International Olympic Committee has actually devalued all Africa
Games, over time.
They've devalued them, and it's seen. I'll tell you, if rugby, football, were used as an Olympic qualifier, we wouldn't have 20 medals.
Yeah,
we wouldn't have 20
the competition
medals.
would be much
stiffer. So in a way, the IOC is devaluing its child and costing Africa, because all Africa Games are like the Olympics of Africa.
Sure.
So if you say they are not used to qualify for the Olympics, then, because Ismail will tell you, right now when you tell me Uganda got silver in football, that's the boys under 20.
Under 20.
I'll say yes, it's a fact. But
the teams that have qualified for the Olympics are Egypt, Morocco, and should be Senegal.
Yes, and if those had come, they were going for it. So in a way, it has devalued it. But for an athlete, it's a beautiful opportunity. They have to go, they have to win, and they don't draw fixtures, as we say. So in that regard, you can't blame the athlete. You get what's in front of you. But like I said, in a way, you can't help but look at the other side of, oh, well, it could have been different.
But Andrew, you've also got to understand, there are things that for me, we might like to discuss the things that happen inside the four lines, because most disciplines happen inside the four lines. But you've also got to understand the history of these games. When the Olympics started back in Greece, I think in 1904, the aim was never to be as inclusive as they've eventually become. So when Africa felt left out, in 1965 in Congo, Brazzaville, the Pan-Africanist leader there, who was that? Could that be Bokassa, if I remember correctly?
Patrice Lumumba?
No, not Patrice Lumumba. Lumumba was in Congo, DRC. It's Congo, Brazzaville, where they started in 1965. You've got to understand where these games start. The Olympics had been seen as segregative towards some continents. So the Pan-Africanists, and I say Pan-Africanists in quotes because I realize politicians use it loosely. Many times they don't even mean it. The Pan-Africans started an alternative to the Olympics. And that's where you find the fight that Andrew has covered too, between National Council of Sports and Olympic committees in many countries. But there are countries that were very smart, that decided that despite there being a disagreement, since these are all managing sports, let's combine the Olympic Committee and the Council of Sports in these countries. And I've seen, for example, in countries like Morocco, they have one federation that manages Olympics and all sports. Egypt, I've seen it in South Africa, it's SASOC. Yeah, they are doing the same thing. Now, in countries like ours, where our Pan-Africanists of the 60s felt that the Olympic Committee was not the solution, they started a National Council of Sports under that Act of 1964 that has since been repealed. Now, while the fight stopped after several years, quietly, the International Olympic Committee continues to assert its authority on what the African Games have become. And we don't even want to spend a show here where we invite Andrew to discuss the Russia Friendship Games versus the Olympic Games.
Yeah, such games come out of suppression.
Yeah, exactly.
So
because Africa felt suppressed
Yeah.
and started these games and these federations. The National Council was like we have here. Now, over time, these things keep coming back. You think the world has developed so much, but then, because one of the reasons in that story that we ran, the International Olympic Committee says that for the African Games to count wholly as an Olympic qualifying event for all the sports, they have to be able to play all the Olympic sports. Now, I was there thinking, how many African countries, you watch the Olympics, you know my favorite sport in the Olympics, the artistic swimming.
Synchronized
Swimming, yeah, with all the makeup and all. Yeah, the makeup that never flows into the pool. I don't know what they use it
Actually,
for.
IOC is racist
It's
in
waterproof
saying that.
makeup.
Now you think about the triathlon, the archery,
But
all
even
these things.
trampoline we can do, but we
But
don't
actually,
do.
speaking of that, yesterday I was watching a documentary on Nature Wild. It's Extreme African Safari. And I was seeing some Tanzanians, is it the Hadza tribe? They were trying to do archery. And they were very accurate on what they were doing, you know, hitting those targets. I was like, can't they be groomed well? And
Even
ready
this
to
man of
play?
key, my friend, claims to be a very good archer.
Okay,
The archery was very good. And I was like, can they be put together for us to create some archery team for Africa to compete in the Olympics?
Okay, Clive, maybe you can answer Daniel's question, but also Ghana is very happy. They're very proud. Accra, Kumasi, and the Gold Coast are very happy with what they did. You know, I think over 5,000 athletes in Africa took part in this. Apart from the power glitch, how well would you rate Ghana?
Better than Roberts. I don't know if Isma can chip in there, but I thought there were so many reservations leading up to the games. The reason we had them in 2024 was because in 2023 they were supposed to happen. Ghana wasn't ready, but then they are postponed. But even as a lead up to the games, 1 month to the games, 2 months to the games, I remember during the Africa Cup of Nations, we were talking with some Ghanaian journalists, and everyone was actually laughing at us, thinking that they were going to organize successful games. They didn't believe that they would actually be able to organize successful games. So for me, I thought they did organize successful games. Outside the games that we had in South Africa, and that is a very long time ago, in Johannesburg, 1999, the African Games, then the All Africa Games didn't really live up to the expectations that many expected them to live up to. And they thought this time around they did. My only disappointment with the African Games over the years is the organizers failing to actually get a broadcaster who can broadcast these games across the African continent. For me, I thought that's an area that needs to be improved on moving forward. Of course, the national broadcaster in Ghana had the games, but you thought there should be a provision where the rest of the African continent can be able to watch these games, at least through the national broadcasters. But by and large, for me, I thought that they did organize very good games. Of course, the fact that you had rugby happening for the first time at the games. We also had cricket happening for the first time at the games. Uganda sending a girls team for the first time at the games. There were so many firsts, but by and large, for me, I thought from afar, there were successful games, just a few areas that need to be improved, especially with us at Team Uganda. And we are celebrating our success today, but that should not blind us that we have gray areas that we need to work on, like the preparations for these games. And this has been the story of us preparing for these games, even in the past. So we need to get ourselves into a situation where we plan better, so that we can have our athletes prepare adequately to go and represent probably the performances will be better than what we had in Accra.
Okay.
There is a friend of mine, as they read ticket numbers at the airport where Clive is.
Oh, yeah, that was
had
the
ticket
voice.
number, something. A friend of mine, Ronald Iga, who is a cyclist, actually sends a message and says, please, abagambe nti eggaali si ya engine ya kusota busosi.
There are 100
The
million.
kajimu by, because someone thought 100 million, then
There's
an engine ya
somewhere.
kusota. So you pay 100 million, then use a lot of energy.
Pedal.
Okay, what makes the difference? Maybe he can tell us.
Okay,
And he himself is a cyclist, but he fell off the bike and fell and was like looking at the sky. But Clive mentioned something important. Okay, there were power glaciers. Maybe Africa has that. There was an internet shutdown in West Africa over the cables that run through the sea, I think hit by huge waves and everything, so that made it very difficult. But look at some of the facilities they've been able to put up for the games. For example, where the games were played, the main venue, University of Ghana Stadium, is built inside the stadium, inside the university. And then you cannot help and think about how we are trying to build a netball arena that Clive has visited in Makerere, and money was given, and what they built is probably the equivalent of where we are seated. Yeah, that's how we are that's how wasteful we are. And then the other thing about we've got like
and patriotic.
Yeah, and Pan-Africanist we are. Now, also the other thing that also stands out is that when government decided to host these games, they invested the money in a place that is sustainable by building the facilities inside the university, because then they do not become white elephants, because then after the games are done, teams within the university and the community can still use them, and in case they have to host games again, they are able to just scrub and put a new coat of paint and host the continent. Now, those are lessons. For me, the one thing every time you go to these games, you see how basic the facilities we need here, because the stadium where the University of Ghana Stadium, where which was the main venue for the games, maybe it's about a 20,000 seater, and I could have an argument with everyone in Uganda and win. We do not need a 60,000 seater stadium. Maybe we need one or two, one in the one we have in Nambola and one more. After that, we need 15, 20,000 seats that are sustainable, that do not look empty, like some of the stadiums I've seen in Greece after the Olympics, or in China after the Olympics 2008, or after the World Cup in Brazil. You look at some of those places and you're thinking, why the waste of money? Now, if you think of investing in sport, and maybe this is for national councils, and the reason perhaps they travel to these games is just things like this. We do not need to build a stadium maybe in downtown. Give it to Ndeje or UC or Makerere. Then we'll be able to use that. Say maybe in Kozi, Ombara University of Science. Then we know we'll be able to use, because these universities will be here 200 years from now. And that is one way to build sustainable sports facilities.
At least they're starting with cricket oval in Chambogo.
In Chambogo.
That's a good start.
If it happens, well and good.
Okay, I'm told Clive has to leave us. But Clive, before you go, maybe your comment on the Uganda Premier League and the final bend that we are on, with Kitara sitting pretty on top. And then I have to ask you your predictions for this week. So in 1 minute, what do you think about the Uganda Premier League?
Actually, I'm still here. The flight has been delayed again until midnight. So, yeah, the flight has been delayed again until
Sorry about that. So sorry. You. Now you have enough. You now have enough time to tell us KCCA's chances of.
Clive, remember the other week we were on this set and talking about the struggle with travel in Africa, and that invention, or rather bad thing that is called a visa. Can you imagine just getting from Entebbe to Accra? If you left Accra at around 1:30 p.m.
Accra time.
Accra time.
Yeah.
You don't get here until 3 a.m., which is 6 a.m. in Accra. How much travel time is that? I was just doing the math. About 17 hours.
But you go through, isn't there a flight like from Nairobi?
Now, to get from here, people who are using Rwanda Air, they left Entebbe, landed in Nairobi, the plane lands and takes off again, lands in Kigali and takes off, lands in Abuja and takes off, then you get to Accra. That is 4 landings in 1 day.
Isn't that
That's how painful Africa is.
Someone was
and the other week, Monitor ran a story about the cost of air travel, and that makes it expensive. The taxes, the price of fuel, all these licenses getting through every border, which doesn't happen, of course, in the EU, because there's one tax zone. So if you pay in Poland, then you pay to the EU, and that's it. That's a challenge that we face. I can imagine when Clive talks about a flight being delayed to depart Entebbe, then being delayed again to depart Kigali for Dar es Salaam.
Well, good to know that we
And we
still...
expect him to be able to speak.
I know, it's
Yeah.
very hard. And even players, when they're playing...
I've had 2 delicious meals during the waiting, and a very nice hotel room. So I'm well rested.
So
Okay.
will Chitara win the league?
Okay, we have to take a break
Yeah.
now and talk about the Uganda Premier League. When we come back, do stay with us.